In the land of Judah, during a time of great hardship, there lived a woman named Mirriam. She was a widow, raising 2 children alone. Though life was difficult, Mirriam remained faithful to God, always observing the Sabbath as a holy day of rest. She would stop her work, light the Sabbath candles, and gather her children to pray and worship. One day the king of Judah issued a decree. All people must work 7 days a week. No one may rest on the Sabbath, or they will lose their land and be cast out of the city. The famine had made the people desperate, and the king believed constant labor was the only solution. Fear spread through the land, and many abandoned the Sabbath, believing they had no choice. But Mirriam refused to work on the holy day. Her friends begged her, saying, "Mirriam, if you do not obey the king, you will lose everything. What about your children?" But Mirriam simply smiled and said, "The Lord is my provider. I will trust in him." Days passed, and the royal guards came to her home. "Mirriam, the king has heard of your disobedience," they said. "You have one last chance. Work on the Sabbath, or you and your children will be thrown into the streets." Tears filled her eyes, but she stood firm. "I will not break God's commandment. My hope is in the Lord." That night she and her children were cast out of their home, wandering the dark and empty streets. Cold and hungry, her little son wept, "Mother, where will we go?" She held him close and whispered, "The Lord will provide." Then she prayed, recalling the words of Scripture, "I have been young, and now am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their children begging for bread." Psalm 37:25. Just then, a kind voice called out, "Mirriam!" She turned to see an elderly merchant standing before her. He was one of the richest men in Judah. "I have heard of your faithfulness," he said. "I need a caretaker for my house and my gardens. You and your children shall live with me, and you may keep the Sabbath holy." Mirriam fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "O Lord, you are faithful. You have not abandoned us." Months later, the king heard of Mirriam's prosperity. He was astonished. "How can this woman, whom I cast out, now live in blessing?" He summoned Mirriam and asked, "Tell me, what is your secret?" She looked into his eyes and spoke with love and humility. "My king, I honored the Lord's Sabbath, and he honored me. His blessings are greater than any decree." The king was deeply moved. He thought of how weary his people were, working without rest. That day, he reversed his law, allowing all of Judah to keep the Sabbath once more. And so, through one woman's faith, an entire nation was reminded of God's love. Mirriam's story teaches us that when we trust in God and honor his Sabbath, he will never forsake us. He provides in ways we cannot see, turning our trials into testimonies, as the Lord has promised. "If you call the Sabbath a delight, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the heights of the earth." Isaiah 58:13-14. May we all, like Mirriam, find rest in the loving arms of God, for the Sabbath is not just a command, it is a gift.